Another instance of Mental Model Monday. Today I'm going to talk about anchoring. Anchoring is a really cool process that gives you new emotional affordances and resources and emotional superpowers that you simply did not have before. So the issue that I was dealing with was that I can work outside of my house just fine and not get distracted and have focused, productive, joyous work. When I'm inside the house, I tend to get pulled in so many different directions. When examining this, it didn't seem like there were really any deeper emotions to deal with, or I was hiding any deep issues. And that's really one key thing about using anchoring. You don't want to use it to bury some deep issues or your sort of work around negative emotions. The other thing was that there was no clear trigger of when I should be in this work mode or in the relax mode. And so it wasn't really a clear tap where I could just say, when this happens, be focused, which is another hint that you may want to use anchoring. So I knew there was an issue here where I sometimes would just get distracted at home. And I wanted a different emotional response sometimes, but not all the time. So I had to figure out what that emotional response was. So what I looked at was, are there times when I am focused at home that when I don't have that emotional response of just distraction and relaxation and that sort of thing? And the answer was yes. I get into this momentum sometimes throughout the day, and I don't get into this spiral because I've already got this momentum going for me. So that was the emotional kernel that I took, that I wanted to be able to call on demand when I needed it, but not that I wanted to have every single time that I sat down in this desk, because that would live at home when I want to relax. So I wanted the option to call this emotional kernel. Anchors are powerful things. And so what I wanted to do was give myself a new emotional force, new emotional superpowers, to not just sit down and have momentum, but to have something else. Something that had all the emotional qualities that I wanted to have. What I came up with was this significance encompassing joyous centered momentum. And that is a mouthful, but let me walk you through how that went. And if you know what focusing is, which is where you sort of focus on an emotion, you try to describe it, this felt sense that you have. This is sort of the reverse of that. This construction is the reverse of focusing. So I started out again with this momentum. I wanted this momentum. And when I focused in on that and I figured out what was a metaphor that would describe that, I was like, well, it's kind of like, oh, I'm a wave. No, I'm like riding a wave, but sort of, I'm not like paddling. I'm on a surfboard. But it's not like I'm still like not working on the surfboard. It's kind of like there's another board in front of me that's just magically getting pulled along by the waves, and I'm holding on. And so this was the anchor right here. This physical anchor for this emotion was holding on to this thing, and this was the image I drew that showed that. And so I looked at that and I said, is there anything missing? Is there anything I could add to that momentum to make it more powerful, more insightful, more of what I want? There's a tenseness, energy to that momentum that doesn't feel right to me. I would really like to have that momentum with ease. I would like that momentum to be centered. All what I'm doing here is I'm stacking adjectives. Rather than coming up with a new word, which is hard, I just add adjectives together, and they eventually describe what I want. And that's what I'm doing with the words. Now with the picture, I figured out how can I change this scene? Take that idea of centeredness. And what I figured out was that there's just this aura, this cloud, and rather than riding on the surfboard, I'm just sort of at ease on the cloud, this like golden, shimmery cloud of aura floating behind as this board pulls me along. The anchor for this was just a more relaxed form of that last one, where I leaned back a little bit and put my hands out and I was holding on. And if I could add that centeredness to this feeling of momentum, I thought that would be a much more powerful, a more easy way of working and getting the same thing accomplished. So I looked at that centeredness and I said, is there anything missing from that? Is there anything that could make that even more powerful? It could really use joy. There wasn't enough happiness. I really wanted to enjoy the work I was doing. As that I was flying through the air with this golden shimmering nimbus, I really wanted to feel the wind in my hair and like the water spraying in my face, and just it was just fun. And there's like the sun, and it felt like amazing. And so I drew an image, and there was like little like hair, and there's wind going through, and there's little droplets of water, and there's a sun in the background, and it really brought that feeling of joy and flow. And so what I added to the trigger here, to the anchor, was this dumb grin that I get when I'm in flow, which is like this. Like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. And I was now had this joyous centered momentum, which was is not something I often feel, but is a new emotional capacity that I'm going to build with this anchoring process. And I looked at that and I said, is there anything I could add to that? Is there anything missing from that thing? And I realized I could have joyous centered momentum, but not actually be doing the right things. I might not be focused on the broader picture. I need to add some perspective to that. Perspective didn't seem quite the right word, so I made up my own combination of word, significance encompassing. I wanted to encompass the significance of everything and then have joyous centered momentum on the most significant things. So I came up with this idea of sort of looking out as I was up here, rather than sort of just enjoying what I was seeing. I was enjoying, I was feeling, I was at ease, I was being pulled through momentum, but I was seeing the entire landscape. My peripherals were open, and I was steering towards the sun on the horizon. And so I created this picture, and this is like supposed to be the horizon here in the circle, and then there's the sun. And so I added this looking up and turning my hands to the anchor. And so now I've got these anchors, I've got these images, and I'm really excited to build the significance encompassing joyous centered momentum, which is not something I've never ever experienced before. It's a totally new emotional capacity for me. I'm going to get the capacity to experience it whenever I want. That whole thing is just metaphor building. Again, that's the opposite of focusing. I'm taking an existing image and building on top of it, and then creating a felt sense from that, rather than the reverse. So the next step was actually to create the felt sense. What I did here was I used sort of a guided ritual called the Masculine Matrix. You put headphones on, it's about a half-hour thing, and you put 4 pieces of paper on the floor, and a 5th one, which is whatever emotion you were feeling that you're trying to get rid of. And so I didn't want relaxation, so I got this sort of distracted ennui that I felt when I wanted to be focused, but I wasn't. I put that in the center, and it had me bring that up. So I'm actually feeling that, I'm focusing on that, what does that feel like? And I put a hologram in the center of the room. I step out of that, I shake it out, and then I go around to each of the papers in turn, and I start bringing those emotions up. And meanwhile, there's like music going on in my head that's making me feel these emotions. I've got the images in my head that give me this metaphor to work with. There's like sound effects. He has me actually, so I've got the auditory things going on. You really want to get all the emotional stimuli you can. I actually printed out pictures that represented each of these, and I put them next to my own drawn images, so that I could look at them and they would evoke this sense. And so I am going around to each of these. I'm turning up the volume on these emotions. I'm imagining like things coming up from the earth that give me these emotions. And this might not be for you. You might need to evoke an emotion or create an emotion a different way. But using external stimuli, something like the Masculine Matrix, I went around to each of these 4 in turn. I started with just the kernel of the emotion, something I could already experience. And then I would add another one. and then I would step out, look at it, sculpt it, add what I want to it, step back in, bring more, and so on and so forth until I had built all of these emotions. And at the end, to add to the ritual of it, I step back in, I destroy that original emotion, that distracted ennui, which is something that will no longer experience when I have the option to choose this significance encompassing joyous centered momentum. And I actually burned the paper with that on it. That's not part of the masculine matrix, the audio, but it added to the ritual of it. And again, ritual is the part that the System 1 understands. This visceral feeling where you're moving, you have audio, you have visuals. This is something that the System 1 understands, and it brings that capacity to you. So I did this ritual, and at the end, during each phase, I made sure I was doing the anchor that I wanted, the actual action that I wanted to bring up the emotion, which in this case was that, so that I could have it, it would be connected. The trigger was, when I do, I feel significance encompassing joyous centered momentum. So I did each trigger at each stage. I added to the trigger, I added to the image, I added to the emotions I felt, and then I put it back onto that original emotion so that if I ever felt that, I would be like, wait, no, I'm supposed to check if I should be feeling this joyous significance encompassing thing instead. So I now have this new emotion I can use, and I can sort of use it whenever I want just by going like that. You have to be careful because let's say I'm in grief and I try to use that thing. My body's going to be like, dude, you've got all these negative hormones in your body. I can't do that right now. And you're actually break the anchor. So don't do that. And that's not healthy anyway to do. So the last step was to create a trigger action plan to decide when I should use the anchor, because I might just forget that I have this new emotional capacity and not use it. And so the tap was, when I feel this chair on my back, I will think about using this anchor. Not only can I use this here, but I have this new emotional capacity and I can create other taps to decide to use it in other places. Now, over time, your brain sort of makes the distinctions between when you use it and when you don't, and you don't even need to use the anchor. The anchor sort of fades away, and the situation itself creates the emotion. So that is anchoring. It's creating a totally new emotional capacity that you didn't have before, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye.